What's going on, everybody? Happy Friday. Not just any Friday. It's a Mike Wahle Friday. I'm joined once again by the one and only Mike Wahle. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike Wahle68. Of course, you can follow me at Andy Herman NFL. Mike, a 3-game winning streak, 4 out of 5. Huge win against the Kansas City Chiefs. It's great to have you back on the show. Let's talk some freaking Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, let's do it. You know what I just noticed for the first time? That when I come on here or anything else on StreamYard, I have hashtag MikeWall68, which is completely wrong. I'll have to fix that at some point.
I have never noticed that either,
Yeah,
which is really funny.
it's only been a couple of years. It's me. It's not you. It's when you come in the screenshot. Please
But you would think
continue.
that like some point I would recognize it. By the way, good to have you back on. Let's talk about that impressive Packers victory. There's certain things like maybe you could say, well, the Chargers, like they dropped some passes and they gave the ball away and did some things and it helped Green Bay. Maybe you could make the argument against Detroit of like, all right, it's a Thursday game. Weird things happen on Thursdays. Detroit's maybe not been trending the greatest. They had that weird game against Chicago. Their defense is struggling a little bit. Maybe, okay, whatever. But man, KC at home, Sunday Night Football, Patrick Mahomes, this felt insanely legit against a really good Spagnuolo defense, which we talked about all last week. This was a really fun win for Green Bay.
Yeah, it was. And let's just talk about our offense versus their defense and how Matt LaFleur and that coaching staff continue to put together gems that are from a menu of play calls. And one thing that they're really doing now, because we talked about Steve Spagnuolo and what is it? Pressure equals or pressure's at a premium. And they're going to bring slot blitzes. They're going to bring a lot of pressure from those linebackers, how aggressive they play towards the line of scrimmage. And what you started seeing was very, very early, we're using motion to make the reads really simple for Jordan Love. So that motion's doing a couple things. One, if you're motioning fast, it's really checking the whole card of that backside safety on how fast they're going to rock and roll if they're playing zone or if they're going to go across the man. Are you going to have leverage on that wide receiver going across the ball? So that's one thing. It put those guys in disadvantageous situations. But the more important thing is it's making the reads for Jordan Love in this group really easy pre-snap. So you can figure out pre-snap what they're in, but then post-snap, even that under center play action pass, shotgun play action pass, all the stuff they're doing, he really has to read one guy. And it's like, I'm going to read that guy. I know what coverage you're in. Snap, read that guy, make the throw. And he's doing it on time, and he's doing it at a much higher level than he was earlier in the year. I think that's partly because he's getting better, but I also think has a lot to do with how Matt's calling these plays. And then obviously wide receivers and tight ends, I think, are doing a much better job of putting themselves in a position to be successful.
It's amazing when everything comes together exactly like that. And I give Matt a ton of credit for, like you said, the game plan and making things a little bit more simplified on offense. But I also give him credit for just utilizing the players and I think the ways that they can be used best. And I've talked about in the past, the wide receivers, the tight ends, the running back, but I even think, to your point, like Jordan's a part of this as well, giving him the ability to have the one read and then play in rhythm. Because as we've seen all the time, when he's on point in rhythm, getting back to his drop and ripping the ball, he's really, really good. I think Matt's done a great job of getting him more of those type of reads. I go to the 4x1, the motion, the fake toss to the right, and then you've just got the receiver coming.
The crosser.
The crosser.
Mm-hmm.
And he just hits it in stride, and it's like just easy, beautiful, fun stuff. And like, give me that stuff. You've got the play action with the extra offensive linemen where you get 2 tight ends wide open in the end zone. Like, just sign me the hell up for the rest of the season.
Let's talk about that when they bring the fullback and they bring 44 in and they run the top. First of all, they ran the orbit and then they ran the toss.
Yeah,
they gave it to AJ, and then in the same, I think it was the same series. It's first series, right? Or maybe it was the second series.
Yeah, first and second.
Yeah, so first and second, and then literally they come back with the exact same look. And this is what we've been talking about all year. And this is how you build out your menu when you're talking about how to construct a very viable game plan against a defense that's going to give you a bunch of different pressure looks. You show them the fullback lead on the toss play.
Yep.
And then you come back because it's a very unique look. Like everybody, if you're a casual fan, you're like, this does not look normal, right? They've done something different here. And that defense, all their eyes are going to go over to the left. And all of a sudden, Tucker Kraft's right behind you on the right. Eric Reed, the safety, missed it. The linebacker missed it. Drew Tranquil getting injured early in this game actually had a really big impact on this game because he's a really good player for them. But those kind of things, making it complementary football from a run pass or a run play action standpoint is huge. But again, I'm not trying to minimize, like, Jordan Love's processing information better. So we're not trying to say like he needs everything to be dumbed down. That's not it. But you certainly do play faster when it's one read, like pre-snap read, post-snap read, get rid of the ball. it's certainly going to be able to play faster and kind of let your natural athleticism, much like we talked about Quay Walker last year, when you wanted to get him on track, like start sending him on dogs. Why? Because there's less to think about. Just be a football player, right? You have to go in the A gap, beat the guy in the A gap. And I think when you get young players and you really start getting them in a groove, it's like reduce the amount of decisions they have to make them elite level decision makers at that one or two things, and then let them go out and be themselves.
Yeah, good friend of the show, Ben Fennell, who I'll be talking to later this week, always says football doesn't have to be hard. Offense doesn't have to be hard. And
Right.
it felt like, they did some really great things in this game to make it not quite as complicated, not dumb it down, but just simplify it, make it easy. And that's what good coaches do on both sides of the ball, is to make things easy for their players to make those easy decisions.
Yeah, no doubt. And when you just talk about even from a route menu, if you just go look back at the two games prior, what is beating the Kansas City Chiefs? Like what route, what combinations, and just revisit it. Like it's not right. Just dress it up a little bit different. You've got great athletes, and to your point earlier, and I think we talked about this last week, the change in ever since they ran that Omaha pump, like the change in how they utilize specific players for specific things. Jaden Reed getting the ball on that first snap of the game, just letting you know, like this is actually part of our running game now, right? And then taking Christian Watson and letting him go on, or the first snap of the game was actually Christian Watson down the middle for the 20-yard comeback, right? And what is that doing? Well, that's challenging leverage of the safeties, understanding, hey, under center play action, linebackers are gonna clog up. And then, of course, these guys will worry about his speed. So we're going to give it to you. And it's creating opportunities based on the characteristics of your player. And it takes time to do that. I think right now you could make the argument that Coach LaFleur is coaching at the highest level that we've seen him over the last 4 seasons.
Couldn't agree more. And I feel like this looks like a totally different team from earlier this season. You go back to some of the stuff that was happening earlier, from Jordan trying to take the snap for a QB sneak and the ball's not snapped, from guys like running into the backfield and the running back would get the ball and there's 3 guys waiting for him, to a lot of pre-snap penalties and just mistakes. And this team beating itself over and over, to not trailing for a single second against the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't think they trailed against Detroit either, if I remember correctly. Either if they did, it wasn't for long. Like this is a totally different team. Is there anything else that you're picking up on from this team that just looks so different than it did earlier this season? And how has it gotten better? I know you put a tweet out there that said you had heard that there's maybe a little bit more extra time going on with the quarterbacks, receivers, and tight ends. It's paying off, and that these young players are really taking it to a whole nother level.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's part of it, but the ebb and flow of teams and how they play during the course of the season is always going to change. It's going to be different from team to team. And I think this team was not playing very well early in the season. They're starting to improve and maybe peak in December at the right time. A lot of these other teams are finding that November lull is a real deal. Like as a player, I can tell you that November is the worst month of the year to play football. It's just everything. You're just grinding and grinding and grinding. It's tough to get motivated as a team, not necessarily as individuals, but as a team, you find a lack of motivation there. You're just trying to get to December and get into that playoff hunt. So I think part of it is just the ebb and flow of the game. But when you just break down what is the real difference between October and the end of November and the beginning of December here, I think one thing you just have to point out is the defensive line is playing at a much higher level individually. I think guys are just making plays and beating their offensive counterparts. And then on the offensive line, we're not making the same mistakes. Like we're not whiffing. You don't see guys just summarily whiffing on players and run plays. Like at the beginning of the season, I thought Josh Myers, I think there was going to be a hunting party out for him. Everybody was so against him. But the reality is, like, the guy plays at a pretty high level, and he just had to clean up those glaring errors. And one thing that's happened, Andy, is, and I know you know this, but because everybody has access to this tape, it's so easy for us to put out a clip of a guy getting beat twice in a game and going like, oh, man, he sucks. And the truth is, like, we all get beaten in games 2 or 3, 4 times. I've whiffed. And Kevin Williams put me. I remember Kevin Williams stuck his hand in my chest, and literally the first thing he hit was back of my helmet. And I was like, oh my God, and nobody even knows that play happened because it wasn't available, and it was a 3-step drop, and Brett got rid of the ball. But those things happen. And so I think these guys, for me, as you watch the entirety of the tape, this is certainly not a dominant offensive line, particularly in the run game, but the emergence of Jack Tom has been big. And I think John Runyon Jr. and Josh Myers have elevated their place since the beginning of the season. And what you're seeing, and Elton Jenkins, to be fair, and what you're seeing now is a line that's not making these egregious errors that lead to 2nd and 13.
Let's talk about Josh Myers for a second, because to your point, there's a play out there this week where Chris Jones is actually on the 4th and 1. Chris Jones smokes Josh Myers.
Yep.
And you can point to it and be like, oh my goodness, like it's Josh Myers again. I thought Josh Myers was fantastic in this game outside of that one play. And guess what? It's Chris freaking Jones. You know what? Chris Jones beat Zach Tom on a play. He beat John Runyon Jr. on a play, beat Sean Ryan on a play, beat Josh Myers on a play. He might have beat Elton on a play. I don't even know. But like he beat everyone in that game, at least for one play. I have no issue with that play for Josh Myers. That's going to happen because that's Chris freaking Jones. I thought the rest of his game was awesome this week.
I think he's playing better, and you continue to. Well, here's what happens as you grow and develop as a player, and so what are the benchmarks you're trying to find? So Josh Myers is a high round draft pick from Ohio State. You expect him to come in here and be the next Corey Linsley, and he looks the part. I think the first season.
Yep.
And then the second season, we're coming and going a little bit, and maybe there's been a little bit of a regression here in this past season, at least in the beginning. But what you're looking for as a player is Josh, you need to get to the point when you're playing against an average player, you win all the time. You can't lose to average players. That's the big deal. You have to have the wherewithal and the intelligence and the football IQ to be able to understand. And when they're giving you tips, tells, and tendencies, you need to be able to take the right steps, have the right balance, right footwork, right hand placement. So you just don't lose to bad players. And then now, so if you say to me, well, he's losing to Chris Jones, I go, okay, everybody loses to Chris Jones. To your point, everyone's going to lose at least once, right? So now it's what are you doing against the other guys? And if you're winning against the other guys consistently, you have to feel good about the progression that he's making, because I think a little bit last year, certainly earlier in this season, you would look at some of the guys that he's losing to and you go, that doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like a second round pick from Ohio State should be losing to this guy, right? So for me, that's the maturation process. It does take time, and it looks like he's certainly heading in the right direction.
Fingers crossed. Couldn't agree more. And hopefully that continues moving forward. I wanted to talk about the end game in this one really quick. A lot's been made of the pass interference or lack thereof. A lot's been made of the late hit out of bounds. Certainly you can touch on those as well. But I did want to for sure talk about one that I haven't touched base on too much this week. And that was the last play on offense. And that was Jordan Love taking the sack. Yeah. And it's very few and far between where it's a positive to take a sack. That might have been one of the very few and far between situations where it was a positive to take a sack.
Yeah, certainly. And I'm guessing that the coaching staff said in the air, you do not throw this ball away. It's either a completion or a sack, and you just go ahead and take it. Because that I think Zach Tom is the one who officially gave up the sack there to Chris. But the reality is Jordan was never going to throw that football unless it was wide ass open. And the reason for that being, I think they went from a minute 56 or minute 57 on the clock, because remember, the Chiefs didn't have any timeouts. So when you kick that field goal and you get it down to 105, 104, you've wasted 45, 55 seconds of time in that segment where now Patrick Mahomes, now we know he can do it with 13 seconds left on the clock, but you're trying to reduce that time as much as possible. And, that's a situation. You'll never hear me say take a sack. You'll never hear me. The whole Joe Burrow thing where he's it's 3rd and 12 and down there, I'm going to take a sack. It's dude, that does so much damage to your offense, the psyche of your offense. I think it's such a bad idea. But in this situation, really, really smart play for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. And I was surprised. I didn't think they were going to run the ball in that situation specifically, but I thought they would find a safe pass that maybe it's a run after the catch opportunity where maybe you pick it up, maybe you don't. I don't mind the fact that they went for the kill shot. It was unfortunate that Casey covered it perfectly and there was nowhere to go with the ball. And it was literally throw it away or eat the sack. And, maybe he could have stepped up a little bit, maybe gained a few yards. So it's not a 10-yard sack, but that's nitpicking at that point. I thought it was heads up. I thought on the whole day, I thought Jordan played heads up, whether it was the 4th and 1 where he gives, Romeo a chance at the ball in that situation. If it's picked off, it's picked off. It's better than taking the sack there in that situation. Yeah. Taking the sack late in the game, it really feels like he's maturing and coming up big in those key situations.
Yeah, I was surprised. Listen, you got to throw it for them to catch it, right? So that 4th and 1 play, it's if you don't throw it and you take one on the chin there, then if you don't put it in play, they could pick it off. They probably should have picked it off, but they didn't pick it off because sometimes those plays are being made, right? What was interesting about that play for me was the check down was wide open. And so, and what they did, something really smart. It's 4th and 1, but you're in that strike zone. So they sent everybody deep. And I think it was A.J. Dillon just kind of leaked out at the end. I mean, we're talking wide open. It was just a no-brainer play. Now, there was Chris Jones is in his face. All these things are happening. But when they had the 3rd and 6 or whatever it was, and he took the sack, I'm thinking they're going to run the same play. Because why not? Because you see what the linebackers have been doing in those situations. So that clear, I thought they were going to go back and get the clear out and then go ahead and give AJ the ball because he's doing a really good job of the yards after catch. Those things happen. But to your point with that 4th and 1, Listen, that is a probably an ill-advised throw thrown off your back foot and all those things, and it worked out. The thing about Jordan though is interesting. Kind of side note is look how many balls he throws off his back foot. Like it's nuts. And in my mind, I keep going like it's going to catch up with you, dude. But it hasn't really caught up with him in the last couple games. He looks really good. But certainly, I'm Brett Favre's lineman, right? You got to throw the ball up if you want your receiver to catch it, right? This isn't, we're not doing anything fancy pants here. Give those guys the opportunity to make plays.
It will be interesting as time goes on, the back foot, the arm angles, all of that, if that does catch up with him at some point. But for right now, keep doing what he's doing because it's been a lot of fun to watch him grow and progress. I want to talk just a second about Christian Watson. You talked about him a little bit earlier. It does feel like when he's playing at the top of his game, it opens up a lot in this offense. You mentioned the dig route at the beginning of the first play of the game, where he's just using his speed to go right at the safety, and then he cuts down and he's wide open in the middle of the field. We see that play that he's able to make in the back of the end zone. Jordan throws him a ball where only he's able to get it. He comes up with a touchdown over the middle. On the other play where Jordan does a phenomenal job stepping up in the pocket, stopping, eyes up, finds Christian, throws with anticipation. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. But he also had that anticipation throw to the sideline, I think on a third down where Watson came back to it, caught it along the sidelines. Like when those two are connecting at that level, it opens up so much more in this offense, and it just changes the entire dynamic. Christian didn't practice today. Hopefully it's nothing long-term. We don't know anything yet, but when really good Christian Watson shows up, a really good offense usually shows up too.
Yeah. And again, I think everybody's been saying this. He's being used in the way that just as a casual observer, it makes the most sense. You put him in situations where he can run away from people or get him moving full speed so he can use his athleticism. That Jordan Love throw to the back of the end zone from the right side. That was one of the best throws that you're ever going to see this year. I mean, the catch was great. You're going to see that catch again. That was a ridiculous throw. I mean, in the back foot, just an absolute ridiculous. It's so hard to make that. And then the body control, athletically, this is why athletes are geniuses in their own right. Like we might not be mathematicians, but we watch a Christian Watson. The ability to manipulate your body back as you're running full speed back over here and just having the wherewithal and the body control to do that, I mean, is so impressive. And then the back end zone when they actually plant the safety back there to double, and the guy safety gets caught watching and he gets beat across the back of the end zone. But Christian Watson is everybody knows he's athletically gifted. Everybody knows he's got an incredible amount of upside, and it's just a question of putting it all together. And from here, it's like, how do you keep evolving? How are you able to be effective on every part of the route tree and like all of that kind of stuff in the future? But for right now, it's like you always ride the wave of success when you're an athlete and things are going well. You just want to ride this wave and get like as much out of it as you can, because there's going to be ebbs and flows in the season. And right now he's full of confidence. And so it's like, keep feeding him the ball and giving him opportunities to be successful while he's riding this wave of confidence.
Totally agreed. Let's flip to the other side of the ball. Want to talk about defense a little bit. It's an interesting game. You go field goal, touchdown on the first 4 drives. Don't really stop them moving the ball. You do stop them in the red zone twice to hold the field goals, which was huge early in the game. And it's feeling like, all right, they scored on their first 4 drives. Like, how is this going to end? And then you get to 21-19, they get the 3 and out. And then it's 24-19, they get the interception, 27-19, and they get the stop at the end of the game. They stop Patrick Mahomes 3 times, game on the line at the end of the game. What did you see from this Packers defense? Was it good enough? Was it trending there? Like, how are you kind of viewing this Packers defense right now?
Well, it's difficult. There's so many dynamics there, right? It's like, that's why the contextual intelligence, when you talk about stats and everything, I think is so important for people to understand. So the Kansas City Chiefs, I think, we're averaging going into the game somewhere around 23 points a game. They get 19, so you go, okay, you're holding them below the average, and you're holding below 20, which is kind of that magic number to kind of expect to win. So you're excited about that, certainly. You're excited about the turnover from Keyshawn Nixon. You're excited about the early sacks they held him out of the end zone from Preston and from Sean Gary. What you're not excited about is this team is still just struggling against the run. I mean, Pacheco, I think, averaged over 6 yards a carry. I think they gave up almost 150 yards on the ground. And for me, it went back to, and I'm very biased towards just for games where you're going to have to stop the run to put Isaiah McDuffie in over some other players. But it goes back to how you attack the line of scrimmage, or the lack thereof, really takes a toll on those defensive linemen up front. And then obviously, if we're catching at the second level, you just see a guy falling forward continuously for those kind of yards. That Kansas City Chiefs team is not clicking on all cylinders right now. I think that's everybody would tell you the same. Patrick Mahomes has the worst quarterback rating of his career, I believe. So it's where we caught them at a good time, certainly. And you can't knock the abilities of Valentine and Valentine, the way that those guys have stepped up and played. And guys are playing good football. So I don't want to dismiss, like, a 19-point game against Kansas City Chiefs is great. But as you look at the Green Bay Packers as a playoff team now, or a playoff contender, it's like, what is the number one thing you need to do in the playoffs? You need to win the line of scrimmage battle. You need to be able to stop the run. And this defense has to have some soul searching opportunities here to figure out what they can do at a much, much higher level to stop that portion of the offense.
Yeah, you beat me to the next point, and the next question is that, like, you are seeing some level of success with this defense, but the run defense is still abysmal. 4.5 yards per carry, 30th in the NFL. And like, there's certain statistics that don't pass the eye test. That one clearly passes the eye test. You've mentioned in the past, like, the catching on the second level. There was a ton of that in this game. Pacheco's powering through runs. There was a couple bad angles from the safeties. Like, I understand some of the stuff, and especially against Patrick Mahomes, of wanting to play two high safeties and things like that. But it just has to be a lot more sound of how you're coming down in the box, making those tackles, and making sure that you're rallying. And there's the play where they rally to the football, and Pacheco in the offensive line still pushes him for like 7-8 more yards. So that to me is still a pretty major concern. And I think as we sort of transition on to Packers Giants and what they need to do in this game coming up, I go back to that Steelers game, because to me it's similar, where the Steelers wanted to run the football. Green Bay still played a lot of too high shell, worried about, getting beat deep. They transitioned later in the game, but the Steelers rushed for 200 plus yards. Kenny Pickett never really beats them through the air, but they give up enough points to get beat. And I look at the Giants this way, in a similar way, of like, they're going to want to establish Saquon Barkley. And if you allow him in that Giants rush offense to go for 200 yards like you did against Pittsburgh, you've got an opportunity for failure and for a loss. I think they have to play this differently than they did against Pittsburgh a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Single safety, there's a comment, I think Coach made a comment about, hey, listen, we're missing kind of entry lanes in single safety high, and we're getting run on in single safety high, which is, a real no for football fans. Like, if you've got one safety, and that means you have 7 or 8 in the box, like, it's time to buckle up your chin strap, and you need to be playing downhill a little bit better than we're playing. So they're not filling the gaps the way they need to, and certainly they're missing some tackle opportunities. But for me, it all stems from, you can take all that, secondary play away. It all stems from your ability at your second level to fill gaps and create one-on-one matchups with those defensive tackles and defensive ends. We didn't do a good job of that last week, certainly transitioning into this Giants game and looking forward. The number one thing is really stop Saquon Barkley. I mean, I think that's the only thing that really, when you look at their offense, that's the only thing that matters. They've got some players out there. I like the way Tommy DeVito goes out there and shows a little swagger. But if Tommy DeVito goes out and pulls a Jake Browning and just drops 27, 28 points, on the Green Bay Packers defense because he's throwing for 3 touchdowns, then, you just kind of like tip your cap to him and go,
yep,
all right, it wasn't our day. But if you go out and give up 150 or 200 to Saquon Barkley, then shame on you, because there's just no, and especially if you watch the Giants team, I really like, I think his name is Michael John Schmitz Jr., right? Schmitz. Okay. The center, that's a huge matchup in this game. Him versus TJ, him versus Kenny. They ask him to do a lot as far as single blocking in their middle zone, which Saquon loves to run. But if you look across the board here, like, this isn't a very, what I would say, athletically gifted line group. Like, you should not lose to these guys. They'll bring in an extra lineman. He's not really effective, to be fair. Waller's not going to be in this game, right? You're almost hoping that Evan Neal plays. I think he's not as good as the guy that's backing him up, Tyree Phillips. I think Tyree Phillips has played much better. I think Rashawn Gary versus Evan Neal is the matchup that everybody from in Wisconsin would like to see, right? And then you have Andrew Thomas, who's a good player on the other side, and he'll do his thing, I think. But when you look across this line, there's no reason. And then you're looking at the third string quarterback. Yep. There's no reason here you're not attacking the line of scrimmage on every snap, right? If they want to get you with some play action stuff, because the other thing you got to remember about this guy, when you watch tape, they give up 6 sacks to the New England Patriots, who don't have a real, like, premium pass rusher right now. Okay, so why are you giving up sacks? Well, you get beat, 1, but 2, this guy's pocket presence is not where it needs to be. Like, he's hearing footsteps, things get heated up a little bit, and he's always looking for the big play. So they've hit some down the field passes, but if you get 6 sacks on a team, the Patriots offense is unwatchable, but you give up 6 sacks, you only give up 10 points. Like, you should be winning every game.
Totally agreed. I think that offensive line versus the Packers defensive front is, as you mentioned, the key to the game and making sure that you're taking Saquon Barkley out of it. Anything else that you're looking at from this Packers-Giants game on maybe the opposite side of the ball, or anything in general that Green Bay can do to try to make sure they're winning this one?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is just like we talked about last week. I mean, I think the menu for the Green Bay Packers, or like the checklist, doesn't really change for the rest of the season. And what is that? It's like, well, let's win first down. So let's put ourselves in advantageous positions on second and medium, third and short, and be able to move the sticks. Why is that important in this game? Because kind of like we did last week, the Giants linebackers play 5 yards off the ball. And if this game really for me is like, if Dexter Lawrence plays, you got one thing going on. Yep. And if Dexter Lawrence's hamstring doesn't allow him to play, it is a completely different game, because they got nobody in that box that you're worried about. And you should be able to double team all the way up to those linebackers. Those linebackers are the key to the game, really. If you sit there and watch tape, when they move, something's happening. If they move up, they're running dogs. If they move back, they're holding fast, and you can double team all the way up to them. So you should be able to not only win first down, but off of that, all your line of scrimmage checks, all your motion stuff, they're running a lot of quarters, a lot of man coverage. You can do it by crossing the ball. You can figure out exactly what they're doing. And back to how well Jordan Love's playing and the reasons why, this is that opportunity then. Okay, they're in quarters, they're in man. We know exactly what we're running. Everybody's on the same page, right? It's like identify, communicate, and execute. And I think they're going to be doing that at a high level this week. I mean, Jordan Love is getting to that trust your eyes, trust your guys motto, like really, really fast right now. And I think this is like a 6-point game. And this is the first time I'm like, I don't think that's enough. Like, I just don't see how they put up points against the Packers.
I love it. I'm so excited for this one. To me, you mentioned Dexter Lawrence. It's not only just like, can he play, but can he play like Dexter Lawrence? Because if he can, like you said, that changes some things. He's a phenomenal football player. If he's playing, but he's half of himself, or if he can't play, that's going to change things up quite a bit for that Giants defense. And the other thing for me is, to me, this game is far, far less about Packers versus Giants than it is Packers versus Packers. The Packers in these sort of games, the only time they're losing is when they're beating themselves. And we saw it a little bit against Denver. We saw it a little bit against Atlanta. We saw it a little bit against the Raiders. Like, those are games that there were times where Green Bay was beating themselves. If Green Bay plays with the same level of focus and intensity that they have over these past few weeks, like you said, I like Green Bay by more than 6 in this one as well. Final thoughts.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, this is a start fast game. Like, can you start fast? Get out of the. I mean, if you get this to be a 10-point, 14-point game by the beginning of the second quarter, you third string quarterback. I mean, it's math, guy. You take the best player out of the field. You have to say this. If you like watching football, though, go watch Dexter Lawrence versus the Washington Commanders. I mean, if you like watching football, that dude had himself an absolute day until he got hurt. Oh my goodness. It would give a center absolute nightmares. Like, if you're a center, you like watching offensive line play, don't watch it. But if you're a fan of football, that Dexter Lawrence tape versus the Commanders is absolutely off the chain.
I think not to that same level, but I think he gave Green Bay a lot of problems last year.
It wasn't good. Yeah, and he's one of those guys too, you can tell, where like his trash talking is kind of funny. Like, you can tell he's not saying, like, he's not talking about your mom or anything. He's just talking about like how bad he's beating you, how easily it is. Like, you punch me, nothing happens. Like, it's kind of matter of fact jokes, which like really are demoralizing for offensive linemen. I'm a big fan.
I don't know if you saw the Luka Doncic trash talk last night against Chris Dunn, but they're complaining, and Luka's just basically like, he's only upset because he can't stop me. He's like just going on about it. And it's like, it was amazing. Mike, phenomenal stuff as always. Enjoy these every single week. Tell everyone where we can find you on social and your YouTube channel.
Yeah, at Mike Wahle 68 on Twitter or X, Process to Perform on Instagram. You can find our On My Block podcast. We just sent out the preview show this morning for this Giants-Packers game. It's on the Process to Perform channel on YouTube. So, Andy, thanks as always for having me on.
Yeah, you bet. Make sure to go check that out. Of course, you can find Mike every week here on the Pack a Day Podcast. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. You can find me at Andy Herman NFL. For Mike, for me, that's going to do it for us this week. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.